Let's go to one of my favourite issues, and that's overzealous fact checkers policing journalism, but then they end up getting it wrong themselves. Remember when career fact checker Daniel Funke said it was fake news to report that Joe Biden looked at his watch during a funeral for soldiers killed during Biden's botched Afghanistan exit?
In reference to the checking of his watch, that didn't happen just once. That happened on every single one that came out of that airplane. It happened on every single one of them. They would release the salute, and he'd look down at his watch on every last one, all 13.
That's right. After outrage from the families of those soldiers, who Funke was essentially calling liars, the publication had to admit Biden did indeed check his watch multiple times. And this week, Funke made headlines again. Another one of his fact checks, this time during his work at Politico, had fallen apart. The Kyle Rittenhouse trial in America centres around a 17-year-old boy shooting dead 2 protesters and injuring a third during the country's civil unrest riots. Prosecutors had charged Kyle in relation to bringing his AR-15 rifle across state borders before the shooting, but the court had never ruled on any of this. Before the court got a chance, Funke fact-checked the claim that it was perfectly legal to carry the particular gun across state borders. He declared the claim false. However, this week, the judge in the case had a different opinion. Due to the rifle's length, it was in fact legal for the boy to take the rifle across state borders.
It is not a short-barreled shotgun or a short-barreled rifle, yes.
Either by barrel or by overall length?
Correct.
All right, and then count 6 is dismissed.
For the second time, and a high-profile time at that, Funke's fact check has fallen apart. So did Politico issue a correction? Not really. It issued this statement. In August 2020, we fact-checked a claim that it was, quote, perfectly legal for Rittenhouse to possess an AR-15 without parental supervision. Our reporting found that it was far from perfectly legal, and that it was, in fact, legally murky. That's why we rated the claim false. Now, it needs to be said that fact-checkers have the power to get news organisations suspended or banned from social media sites. So while they are all hilariously incompetent, particularly in this situation, there is a very serious side to giving so much power to people who are just simply stupid. It should not be a defence that because Funke or Politico didn't understand the law, it means the law was murky. A judge did understand the law, and the charge was dismissed on the spot. His words were clear, not murky. The only thing that's confusing is the Orwellian doublespeak verbal gymnastics Politico had to go through to justify its dodgy reporting. If they can't even admit their mistakes, they should not have the power to censor. Michael, I'm keen to hear your thoughts on this. I don't know if you've ever come across any fact checks that have shifted or been labelled something partly false. That's my favourite one, or missing context. But there is a degree of responsibility if you're a journalist making these claims and really policing political speech. Is it disappointing when you see that there's not the responsibility on the other side as well?
Yeah, well, I think the whole sort of, fact check industry that sprung up, I guess, close to a decade ago now, is sort of, a bit outdated now, because we know that there are things that seem simple on their face that are, much more complex underneath the surface. And you just think, over the last 18 months, Twitter and Facebook were censoring people who mentioned the lab leak theory, I think, in regards to COVID-19. And since that, due to the increasing amount of information coming from that, that looks like a very sort of regrettable decision in hindsight. The issue with this Rittenhouse thing is that it's a very interesting case because the media has become so polarised on it that they're trying to read so much into what happened and our sort of reportage of it that what we've missed is that the law shouldn't be sort of examined in terms of a highly partisan environment like this, and I think that the way that the national and international media have sort of covered this is just a real shame, because everyone's trying to hoist up their flagpole, in terms of where the facts lie on this thing. And the judge is even being called into question on the matter, for his perceived conservatism or, his whiteness or anything like that. It's just not the way that the media should be covering, courts and the administration of justice. I think it's a real sort of issue,
I couldn't agree more. And Sophie, I've spent a fair bit of time watching the case, and they're getting into these extremely in-depth legal arguments. It's incredibly complex. And then sometimes a judge will come up with some kind of argument as a hypothetical, and then that gets taken by people on Twitter that aren't aware of the legal process. They snippet him up out of context, and they take it to mean that he's biased. And I saw some suggestion that he was even a white supremacist.
Oh, look, Jack, Twitter, I mean, where do we start with that rubbish that goes on that cesspit of a site? But look, let me say this. I think we probably need a fact check of these fact-checking departments. I mean, some of their stuff that they put out, and this is across the world, is absolute rubbish. I mean, we had ABC Fact Check calling out recently about whether Victoria had the longest lockdown in the world. And often these fact checkers can't actually come up with a yes or no answer. It's always unclear or might be possible, or it's all a bit vague. I take fact-checking with a grain of salt, but if they do stuff it up, they should own up to their mistakes and say, yes, we have made a mistake. And I just think these fact-checkers are getting far too much oxygen and often pushing agendas that suit the result that they want to see.
So, Michael, it raises a really good point about who elects these fact-checkers and who gives them the responsibility to police speech.
Yeah, well, the media's job isn't to tell people what to think. It's to report information, ask as many people for their view on the matter as possible, and to let the readers make up their minds. The media, the whole fact check sort of industry that's sprung up is quite sort of it looks down on people's intelligence, and the person on the street is smart enough to make up their own mind if they're just given all of the information possible that isn't trying to sway them too heavily one way or the other. And that's the same with this case. The crazy thing about this Rittenhouse case is that, there's video footage of what happened on the night in question when he shot and killed 2 people and injured a third. And yet the media is sort of trying to push as many narratives to explain what happened. Whereas it's very clear if you just watch the footage, there's not a lot that's up for debate there. I don't feel.
Yeah, they chased him down a street and hit him, and then they got shot. And I guess the only question is, was it self-defence? And I think Sophie as well. Back to the point with fact checkers. It's not really the job of journalists, even fact checkers, necessarily to reach a conclusion. Sometimes the trial needs to commence and we need the jurors to make a decision. And it's not really the place of fact checkers to say that this is correct or this is incorrect. It's usurping the entire judicial process.
That's right, Jack. They should probably stay out of these sorts of things until there's a final result. As I said, it's agenda-driven often the time. They reach a conclusion that they want to push out, and then the other narrative is quashed and they've told that it's wrong. So I think the whole thing is fraught with danger, and these fact checkers are treated like they're the top tier of media. And if it's deemed wrong by then that it is wrong, and that is often, or sometimes, not the case.
Yeah, I'd also make the point that they're often the most unqualified junior reporters. They're fresh graduates straight out of university. They've never done a death knock. They've never broken a story of any kind of legitimacy. That's why they're doing this kind of menial fact-checking work. They are the last person who should be doing it in reality.